from the Salt Lake Tribune, these Utah brothers want the Supreme Court to remove Joe Biden from the White House and reinstate Donald Trump. The U.S. Supreme Court could decide on Friday whether or not to hear a long-shot lawsuit that alleges members of Congress broke their oath of office by certifying the 2020 presidential election. Now, I'm sorry if this comes off as dismissive, but long shot is an understatement. Not because I'm not making an argument on the merits. I always think that merits should be heard out. And sometimes that means summary dismissal. Sometimes it means discovery. Sometimes it means summary judgment, whatever. But the idea that, what are we looking at? The idea that 387 members of Congress, the president and vice president, would be removed by the Supreme Court is just so far-fetched. I do not believe there is a reality in which that could happen. Okay, obviously, if there's infinite realities, it happens infinite number of times. But I'm just like, as much as it, I mean, I wish. How amazing would it be if, like, come Monday, the Supreme Court's like, we're going to hear the lawsuit. And then they bang the gavel and they're like, you're right. Congress dismissed, president gone, and then we have no Congress and we have no executive branch. Luke?
Sounds pretty good.
One could only dream.
Right.
I think anything's possible. I don't know anymore. The last 5 years have proven to me that literally anything's possible. But this does seem like an evolution of a lot of the Q stuff where I had friends, I would go over their house and it'd be like, all these people have died. And I think they're, in Guantanamo. And I'm like, I don't know about that, dude, but maybe.
Well, I don't trust these news outlets. Like the Salt Lake Tribune says it's making accusations of fraud and all that stuff. Maybe I just don't believe them.
Yeah.
Because I think there is actual grounds for a lawsuit based on procedural elements of the 2020 election. That is to say, is universal mail-in voting constitutional? Some of these questions never got resolved in many states. Texas v. Pennsylvania never even got heard. I think it was Texas v. Pennsylvania was the major lawsuit. And the Supreme Court refused to hear it. So there never even was an argument about whether or not anything that was going on was constitutional. I think the court should hear that. If that is the basis for this, I certainly don't see a reality in which 300 and nearly the entirety of Congress is removed. I think 75% of this country would be in favor of that. Isn't that kind of crazy? Approval for Congress is so low that if they held like a convention of states and a referendum on like just removing and restarting Congress, I bet it would pass.
Probably.
So
I'm seeing a lot of people cheer the last few days, which is exciting in terms of
Kevin
not voting on
McCarthy?
the speaker, right?
Yeah.
I see people I'm friends with who disagree with me on certain things politically, but we can all enjoy that because it's just stalling a place that I think seeks to harm us anyway.
Well, at 10 o'clock, they are going to reconvene in the House, and then Kevin McCarthy is claiming he's going to win, so we'll see. But I can say this. Whatever ends up happening with the Brunson thing, I'm going to go ahead and bet probably nothing. I think the Supreme Court will not hear it. If they do, I will be very surprised. But regardless of what you think about this case, I think it's fair to say that there is something deeply wrong with this country. And that we all recognize it, whether the left recognizes it or the right does. The establishment, there is something deeply wrong. And what that solution is, you'd think would be a regis of grievances through a lawsuit. But it seems like none of these things ever have an impact. And the argument from the machine is always they're meritless. And it's just like, come on, man. As you wrote about with the Carrie Lake stuff, the judge ruled against Carrie Lake. She's appealing. But there was evidence presented that needs to be accounted for. That is to say, why were the tabulators rejecting ballots? Because they were 19-inch images on 20-inch paper, so they couldn't go through. That creates a problem. And you can't just be like, oh, well, don't worry. They dropped it in a ballot box and it got counted later. And it's like, okay, so let's have a conversation about how at, 72 locations?
Yeah.
Someone changed the images on these printers.
Yep.
Like that,
they just started talking about on the second day of trial.
Exactly. And they denied it happened in the first day.
Right.
So if the end result is that there was one guy who went around going and pressing the buttons, lock him up. Mm-hmm. But they just ignore it. That's the problem.
Yep. Even the courtroom couldn't run things technically, like proficiently. So like if a small closed system like a courtroom couldn't even get like HDMI cables right, what makes you think all these elections are going on
Wait, you guys
safely?
still have faith in government?
Right. Luke and I checked out.
You think they're going to do something good for you?
It's like I'm trying to, I know I don't have faith in the government, but it's like I'm trying to keep faith in people. But I'm losing faith in people because I even think if we remove the government, like I was saying to you about moving on to an
You'll
anarchist,
get there.
I know, but how? Because I'm surrounded by people who truly worship the establishment.
Well, the argument I would make is because psychopaths usually flee to the biggest positions of power. This is why government is a vector for them, and we should always push back against them.
Yeah.
Sorry, I thought you were raising your hand trying to say
I know,
something.
No, I got a tech deck.
Yeah.
Practicing with I usually take with my left, so I'm using my right.
I agree,
That's good,
but
Ted.
yeah, the other thing about that trial that was upsetting is like I was also kind of having flashbacks to the summer of the riots, because even if you have evidence, even if they show it in court, a whole country could look at it together and half of them could just not believe the evidence. Like even if it's a video showing these things not working, people would be like, nah, don't believe it. And it's like the problem isn't about the evidence, it's not about the system really, because now it's really about just how we view ourselves and the world. And that's where I'm like, my pessimist nihilism is starting to creep in, because we're not in a good place there.
Totally. Same.
I'm so white-pilled about the future.
That's good, because I was going to ask you, like, you talk to a lot of survivors.
Yeah.
How do you keep hope in when you hear all these like dark stories?
So there's evil and there's darkness in the world, but there's also a lot of good in the world. And good and light and love will win in the end. And unfortunately, not everybody will make it there with us. Not everybody going to make it, but it will win in the end. History has shown us this repeatedly over and over again, no matter how dark things are. Some will make it, and good and light and love will win in the end, and it doesn't stay bad forever.
I love that.
I want to ask one quick question before we go to super chats. I was just thinking about this because
Yeah.
I'm seeing people chat. My question is, and it's not just for you, but for anyone. Can a woman choose to be a sex worker at the request of a man?
Can you say that again?
If a man asks a woman to be a sex worker working for him, and she says yes, is that a legitimate choice she made?
So the woman is over 18 and the man's over 18, and is there
the man said-
coercion? Is there coercion? Like when you say ask,
Just we'll put plain and simple. A man goes to a woman and says, "I'm going to create a cam business. How would you like to be one of my cam girls?" And she says yes. Is that a legitimate choice on her part?
it just depends on the entire breakdown of it. So, and by the way, everyone's going to have an opinion on this, and many people won't agree with me. I believe that an individual can be a willing adult entertainer, but that would have to come from inside the individual that wants to be a willing adult entertainer. As far as someone asking, like if you said to me, "Hey, Eliza, I need an extra host on the show. Will you come be a host on the show?" I could then choose, but even if I didn't ask you to be a host on the show, then I would still be choosing to be a host on the show. Does that make? I don't know.
Well, here's the reason.
Each situation is going to be different. So if force, fraud, or coercion is involved, it's human trafficking. If it's not involved, then it's not.
Even
human
if
trafficking.
it's just having you host a show, like if a
No.
man,
No, I'm sorry. I wasn't trying to mix the two with the camming. No.
Well, so this is
that
where
would only be labor trafficking if you used force,
Right.
fraud, or coercion to get me to work for you for free and you kept the money.
So for free. So if you were
Free
paid,
or a little bit of a pay.
So this is what I was getting to, because someone said in the chat,
Yeah.
regret is not rape or something like that. And others made the point that if women chose to do a job for someone, the reasons they chose to do the job aren't material. And so here's what I was thinking. I made a tweet that got a lot of attention, and I thought it was hilarious. I said, if sex work is work, then can an employer require his staff to service him
I
as part of
remember
their
that
job?
tweet, Tim.
But here's the problem.
I remember that tweet.
It's a real question. It's a real question that they can't answer, and that's why they got mad. Because clearly, sex work is not work. Sex work is sex work.
So no means no. And if an individual at any time expresses that they're not comfortable, they should be allowed to go
Fired.
or allowed to stop without. I'm going back to the original question, just to be clear. But as far as coercion goes, it would depend. And some folks identify. So do I think someone can willingly do that work? Yes.
So-
do I think folks can be coerced into doing the work? Yes. That would be up to the individual doing it. And in the case of a survivor stepping forward or victim stepping forward, we would let the court decide if it was coerced.
So
was
would
that
it-
person able to leave at any time?
Right. So would it-
Anytime?
Yes. So would it be coercion if I said, Shane, move from California to West Virginia, where you will have this job hosting this show. And don't worry, we'll make sure you have a place to live. And if Shane was like, man, it's going to be really hard for me to move. Don't worry, man, we'll take care of you. Then he gets here and I say, I want you to take the garbage out now. Otherwise, I'm firing you. Is that coercion?
It would depend on the nature. I mean, there's a lot of variables there.
I don't know.
Was that part of his job that you agreed on? Was there a written agreement?
Now,
this is
my point.
Be coercion.
If you go to a person who lives in Canada and say, move to the United States,
yes,
you'll be here on a work visa. We'll pay you X amount of dollars. We'll give you a place to live, and you will do job A.
Yes.
Then they arrive, and you say, you know what? We also want you to take the garbage out from now on. And they say, hey, man, I didn't agree to do the garbage. Well, if you don't do it, I'm firing you. You can't. But if you fire me, how am I going to get back to my home country? Well, that's too bad. You should have thought of that. Like, is that coercion?
Are they holding the papers? Are they restricting them from walking out the door?
No, you can leave. Good luck getting a plane back to Canada, though, and finding a place to live once you go back to your country. Is that coercion?
Maybe you lured them there under false pretenses, but I would let the courts decide coercion. To me, that doesn't sound coercive. It is coercion in a way, but not in a way of human trafficking. That's
so
what I would say.
What if a guy said to a woman, come work for me and be the host of a show.
Yeah.
We'll pay you.
Yes.
Then she gets here and they say, as part of your job, you'll be performing sex acts. And she goes, no. Well, then you can get out. You're fired. And is that coercion?
Yes.
But this is my point. The only difference is the action. If the action is something like physical labor, you say, well, maybe it's for the court to decide. If it's sexual, hands down it is. That's my point. Sex work is not work. Sex work is clearly distinct. Sex work is clearly its own category.
Well, that would also possibly fall under sexual harassment. That would be a couple different crimes, but I'm not going to...
This is the point I was making to the left. When they come out and say sex work is work, they are basically saying that whether you are performing a sex act or taking out the garbage, you're doing work. And then that's why I asked that question. No, that's not true. Because sex is clearly in a specific protected category. I mean, like acts of a sexual nature, that taking out the garbage is not. You go to a lawyer and you say, I want you taking out your garbage. If they say no, you can fire them. You cannot go to a lawyer and say, I want you to start performing gratification on another person. That's illegal. So as much as many of these leftists try to make that argument, it's just not the case. And that's why I agree with you. Telling someone to come out for a job that's like juggling bowling pins, and then when they get there, you say, you also got to clean the floors, and they say, no, well, then you're fired. Yeah, well, too bad you got fired. But if they say, come out here to juggle bowling pins, once they get there, they say, now you've got to perform sex acts. Okay, now you're into that trafficking, like you're in that coercion territory.
Happens a lot, more than you'd think, actually.
Yeah.
I don't know. The switch up happens pretty quickly too. But it's the blink of an eye, and especially when you're scared, it's hard to just walk away. It's
interesting that that view is more conservative. The leftist progressive view tends to be that sex work is just work, and who cares? Unless and until you advocate for that to be applied to the labor market, and then all of a sudden the 50-year-old fat slob has the right to incorporate in his smoothie making position sexual gratification. Well, it's just work. That was kind of my point. Like, if you think it is just work, and I don't, then why couldn't an employer say, job description for store clerk, ringing up the cheeseburgers, handing out the bags, and giving blowjobs? Thanks for watching this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. Hang out with us live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. and become a member over at timcast.com for uncensored, members-only shows exclusive. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.